I can see both sides of this argument, to be honest. I know there's a lot of people who think that Eddie Hearn is right to criticize Umar and IFL for asking him probing questions all the time and him being very candid, but they don't do the same with promoters like Frank Warren. They tread on eggshells around him. So I get why Eddie Hearn would be miffed about that. But at the same time, I understand IFL's position, because think about it. Put yourself in their shoes. If you have a business which relies upon access to promoters, fighters, getting to their press conferences and shows and what have you, if you have a business that relies on all that, if you start upsetting people, you're going to get banned from their shows, you're going to get banned from their press conferences, and then your competition is going to be able to take your place at these events. You see it. Frank Warren has been known over the years to ban people from his press conferences. He's been known over the years to get the ump with certain journalists. And of course, he's sued many people, or at least threatened to sue many people in newspapers, etc. So do you as IFL want to put yourselves in that position? Yes, they ask probing questions of Eddie Hearn because Eddie Hearn is open to allow that kind of thing. He's not one of these guys who's going to get you to edit the interview afterwards and change the interview or pull the interview. He has decided that he's going to be very open and accessible. Now, is that because he's just a very open and accessible person by nature? Or is it a strategic thing for PR purposes whereby he's thinking, I need to be different than the old school promoters who were very, I don't want to say authoritarian, but they had a certain way of treating the press and a certain way of treating the media, which wasn't necessarily the most accommodating. Eddie Hearn has decided that he's going to be the most accommodating. No publicity is bad publicity. Going on that ethos. Because when Eddie Hearn first went to the United States with DAZN, he was allowing people into his events who were not just critical of him on the internet, they were saying virtually slanderous things about him. But he was happy to let well, let me not say happy, but he was letting them into his events, his press conferences and so on. Maybe he felt like he could win them over, where if you say critical things about him, he's not going to ban you from events. He's going to continue letting you in. And maybe these people will learn to appreciate that. You see it. And of course, that brings us back to the current situation where Eddie Hearn, I guess, feels like Umar and Coogan don't appreciate the fact that he's so open because they're not being as critical face to face of Frank Warren. So I don't know. I could see both sides of the argument, because what are IFL supposed to do? Are they supposed to try and talk to Frank Warren the same way they talk to Eddie Hearn and then get denied interviews? At the end of the day, Frank Warren has a certain degree of power in the game. I don't know whether he can stop IFL interviewing all of his fighters, but he might be able to stop them interviewing some of his fighters. Who knows? And I have to imagine he can definitely stop them coming to his events or coming to his press conferences, etc. So what would you do? Like, never mind having a go at IFL and Umar and Coogan. What would you do in their position? You're telling me you would bite the bullet, ask the tough questions to Frank Warren. And to be fair, they did ask questions that Eddie Hearn assumed they didn't ask, right? But perhaps they didn't ask them in a way that they would have asked the questions of Eddie Hearn. Maybe they weren't quite as probing, they weren't quite as assertive with the questions when they asked them to Frank Warren. But what would you do in that position? Would you risk getting banned from his events and not getting access to him and then allowing other people, your competition, to get that access? What would you do in that situation there? Let me know in the comments below. I did find this interview quite interesting because Eddie was a bit spiky with Umar. He said that his interviewing is, did he say not very good? He was quite spiky, and Umar was a little taken aback. That's how he sounded to me anyway. He was a little taken aback by how spiky Eddie Hearn was being, because he's normally very pally-pally with IFL. And there was even some people in the comment section saying that Eddie Hearn should boycott IFL for a while until they fix up, until they start asking Frank Warren the same kind of questions that they ask him. So, yeah, the only time I can remember Eddie Hearn being somewhat hostile to IFL was many, many years ago. There was an interview that Eddie did with Coogan in the car. They were both in the car, and Eddie was really ripping into Coogan, but this time it wasn't even funny. It was like he was being spiteful and it was quite dark. I have to imagine that was a situation where Eddie was upset about something else going on in his life, perhaps business-wise, and he was taking out on Coogan in that particular moment. Was it something similar here? Is there something behind the scenes that Eddie Hearn is not happy about, and that contributed to the way he was talking to Umar? Now, obviously, I'm sure he's a bit annoyed with IFL anyway, but the way you treat someone you're annoyed with, the hostility, if you want to use that word, you show towards them can be amplified by other things that are going on in your life that you're frustrated about. You see it? So anyway, I found it interesting. I found it entertaining. There's people who have put up scorecards, right? Twitter scorecards. They're saying that Eddie Hearn won by unanimous decision. Other people are saying, nah, Umar actually won it by knockout or whatever the case. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Let me know how you scored it. Who got the better of this exchange? Was it Eddie Hearn or was it Umar, IFL Umar? Let me know.